it has been but one short year since the champions of Krynn claimed victory over the mass forces of evil. Now, the Lord of the Death Knight, Soth himself, is preparing to wreak havoc and eruption of evil such as Krynn has never witnessed. As members of the special Islamic Order of the Champions of Krynn, you and your party stand as the only force capable of answering Soth's deadly challenge and living to tell of it. Originally released early in 1991, my guess would be in April, and a simultaneous release for the Commodore 64 and MS-DOS, with the 64 being the origin system. Today, we'll be covering another beloved Gold Box game, the second in the Dragonlance line, fifth overall, Death Knights of Krynn. This would be the direct sequel of Champions of Krynn, which I have already covered. Ports would be released for the Commodore Amiga and the PC 9801 in Japan. Today, we are covering the Amiga version. Here on the Amiga, I found conflicting release information, but all evidence weighed, I am going to say the summer of 1991. I'll go with August. It was developed and published by Strategic Simulations Incorporated, with a licensing agreement from TSR of Dungeons and Dragons. SSI ported the Amiga version in-house in America, NTSC game 60Hz with a 4:3 aspect ratio. We'll start off looking at the manual and what has to be one of the more serious gold box covers with its red, gray, and black tones. I knew I was in for some adventure coming to this game as a kid, and not just big booze, although I certainly wouldn't turn down some of those. You are cordially invited to attend the first anniversary of the victory of the Battle of Krynn. This will be both a celebration of the great victory and a commemoration for those who fell, achieving it. 1 year ago, the forces of evil were united under the powerful Auric Draconian Marchani. He had once again uncovered the method of corrupting dragon eggs into Draconians. A small band of heroes were able to slip into Marchani's stronghold in Krynn and slay this foul minion of the evil goddess Texas before the magic could be used. Without the Draconian force, the Knights of Solamnia were able to rout the evil army and bring peace to the region again. When I said this was a direct sequel to Champions of Krynn, it's like none other in the Gold Box line. Maya screams in despair as she recognizes the gruesome remains of her ex-lover, Sir Carl, both of which were in the first game. And the ending of that game sets up this game's main villain, Lord Soth, who appears at the end of Champions. The tradition in the Forgotten Realms line is your powerful group of adventurers has somehow been knocked unconscious and transported to this new area. And a completely separate story evolves around that. So although you transfer your characters forward in those games, and they are sequels, they're not sequels like Death Knights is to Champions. They're also connected on a geographic level, with Death Knights taking place to the northwest of Gargath Outpost, whereas in Champions it was to the southeast. Both Gargath and Throttle appear in both games. The major cities of the region are Kalaman and Vingard Keep. They loosely administer the large number of small villages in the region. These include the dwarven village of Turf, the gnomish village of Quazzle, and the human towns of Cerberus and Kikos. Many wars have been fought in this region, leaving several ruined old castles and forts. Many have evil reputations and should be avoided. Perhaps the most famous of them is Dergard Keep, once the home of the famous Knight of the Rose, Lord Soth. It now lies abandoned and decayed. So a big plus if you're looking for a continuation between the games, with the story interconnecting between them. My characters are also returning with all of their weapons except for a couple godly ones. Scorpia, the first game in the entire franchise to achieve that. And not a very common one for other RPGs either. Although many of them are actually recreations of my original characters. I transferred all of them over to get their weapons, but several had to be recreated due to their race limitations. For example, Jakku was a Kender in the first game who could provoke their opponents into a mindless rage, reducing their Thaco, and they had the Hupak, which could be used at close or long range. Amiga Bill was one of the dwarf classes, but I turned him into a human paladin. Most of the multi-class characters I changed to Qualinseti elves. So the maximum level attainable in this game for most classes is 14, with the thieves going to 18. So Jakku is a multi-class thief/cleric, but the Kender can only make it to level 8 as a cleric in this game. Wasn't a problem in the first game, it's a big problem here. Several of my characters were multi-classed in 3 ways: fighter, mage, and cleric. And again, the Quallen City Elves are the only race which can have the maximum levels for all of those categories, along with the human. So with a few exceptions, all of the Gold Box games are following the letter of the law in terms of the D&D First Edition rules, which were notoriously weighted towards humans. It's unfortunate that you have to mess with your party, although personally I kind of enjoy sitting there reading the manual and figuring out how I need to tweak everything. And the Dragonlance line does do it better than in the Forgotten Realms, where other than Pool of Radiance, after that, all of the games you're pretty much only using human characters. I've still got a little variety over here. And in addition to the aforementioned Amiga Bill and Jakku Gamer, my party also includes Intricate of Amiga Love, Esper Dreams, and Stygian Phoenix. Check the description for links to them, and how about that fan art from Stygian? Time for some historical context. Amazing Computing, October 1991. New products and other neat stuff. A party is taking place commemorating the victory over the evil forces when the celebration is disrupted by the undead Sir Carl swooping in on a death dragon. When Sir Carl steals the Dragonlance, the champions decide to find him and recover it. As they travel, their goal and adventure prove to be much different than ever imagined. Suggested retail price, $49.95, incorrectly giving credit to Electronic Arts, the distributor of the game, not the developer, not the publisher. They just shipped it to the stores. But taking away 2 or 3 months for magazine turnaround time, that is what makes me say summer of 1991 for the Amiga release. The actual review came next month, November of 1991. Some news from Bandito. While most of the computer business is flat, Commodore had a bang-up year. Commodore earned net income of $48.2 million in fiscal 1991, up from $1.5 million last year. Commodore sales rose 18% from $887.3 million to over $1 billion. Irving Gold attributed the results to the company's strength in Europe, which accounted for more than 85% of Commodore's total sales. Commodore said sales of the IBM-compatible line of PCs rose 35%. Sales of the venerable Commodore 64 increased 30%. And those of the Amiga line grew by 20%. Astute observers will note that the Commodore 64 sales grew more than Amiga, which is really rather frightening. The review from Jeff James, another product resulting from the collaboration of SSI and TSR, manufacturers of the popular Advanced Dungeons & Dragons pen and paper game. Death Knights of Krynn picks up where its predecessor left off. Death Knights is based upon the playing interface pioneered in SSI's Pool of Radiance a few years back, used by nearly a half a dozen of SSI's games since then. Similar to Bard's Tale and Might and Magic, Death Knight shows that this playing interface is beginning to grow rather long in the tooth. My complaints may be falling upon the deaf ears of die-hard fantasy gamers. Yes, but I still think that SSI could add some much-needed improvements to the system. Perhaps in answer to some of my whining, Death Knights does feature a few welcome embellishments upon that time-worn gaming system, created in-house by the SSI Special Projects team, as was Champions. The graphics and animation Death Knights seem to be a bit better than what I've seen in other SSI offerings, providing full 32-color support. Death Knight also features a small collection of professionally drawn character icons for players to choose from. Overall, Death Knights is one of the better sequels I've played in quite a while, and all the extra little enhancements are in its favor. If you love Champions of Krynn, Death Knights is sure to please. SSI's Gold Box series might not earn my vote as the best Amiga role-playing system, but Death Knights definitely nudges it a step further in the right direction. What runs but never walks, sings but never talks. Love the few riddles scattered about the game. As for Amazing Computing, from the perspective of somebody who obviously isn't into these games, the review is fair enough. He's not strictly attacking the game. He says it's a worn engine, the Amiga could do better, which is true. But he's also able to see the other side, saying that it's one of the better sequels he's played lately, period, all games included. And finally attempting to speak for those who obviously do enjoy the games, saying that they will be very pleased with it. So it's fair enough, but my thing is, how many Gold Box games did they need to make before it crossed your mind that perhaps we should be letting somebody who actually does respect these games review them? How am I supposed to respect your thoughts on an aged game engine when you're mentioning The Bard's Tale and Might and Magic as being very similar? Whew, what fine company to be in, am I right? I wonder if those games took any inspiration from a certain D&D system which had been around since the 70s. How am I to respect your thoughts on this game upgrading its graphics to 32 colors when in fact Pool of Radiance had been 32 colors, as well as Champions of Krynn? Those player icons that you like so much in combat? Amiga exclusives, by the way, first appeared in Champions. I have good things to say about this game. I have critiques of it as well, both of which are going to mean a hell of a lot more coming from those who respect these games. So when I say that the spell blowing up around the Lich is an example of this game featuring better animation than previous games, but that the portraits feature less animation than the other games, which kind of makes it all a wash, you know that I know what I'm talking about because I played these games and I rewatched and read my previous reviews. With the portraits, what's there is good, but there is definitely less animations in this game than the previous ones, although the Amiga version adds gradients for the first time, definitely giving that feeling of VGA far before the actual VGA games. These are much more nuanced and therefore complex titles to cover than many people give them credit for. They just assume that the same game engine equates to the same game retold, and they are wrong. I view Curse of the Azure Bonds as well as Champions of Krynn as quite the departure in style to the original Pool of Radiance, and Death Knights of Krynn, for me, is a return to what I loved from that first game. Non-linear gameplay would be one of the big ones. We're still in the beginning of the game, and we've already spent quite a bit of time exploring optional areas, each of which have their own self-contained story. Now, there are several people who will point you towards the next mainline element of the story, but it's not a straight line to those people. You can easily find yourself in these optional areas while traveling about, and there's even some hidden ones in there as well. There's a return of the classic CRPG misdirection, where out of the first area, you'll be going up the mountains, and you'll naturally find yourself near Dulcimer, which is where I stopped when I first played this game back in the day, and I wish I hadn't. Most of these areas are not closed off to you, and you'll learn by going to them whether or not you should be there. Big fan of non-linear gameplay. But Death Knights isn't just going back to where it all started. It has its own style as well. I'd call this the most creepy Gold Box game. This is the one to play at Halloween. From the beginning until the end, you'll be facing the living dead. And while that is a factor in the rest of the Gold Box games, it's constantly a threat here. There are three main villains, all of whom are undead, and even here in Kalaman, a gang stops you, and it has that creepy feeling throughout its entirety. And despite that focus on the undead, you'll still be facing a diverse set of creatures. Champions of Krynn had a focus on the Draconians, who definitely outstayed their welcome. And while they're in this game, they are used sparingly. In contrast, the undead, you're happy to see them. Info, April 1991. SSI has more of their Advanced Dungeons & Dragons series on the way, with Eye of the Beholder and Death Knights of Krynn to be the next releases. So this would be the conflicting information on the release date I was telling you about. But my feeling is this is just an announcement. It's not actually ready. Questbusters, September 1991. New for Amiga, US Gold, just released Knights of Crystallion, which uses hand mode graphics for some devastating graphics. SSI's Death Knights of Krynn is also out for Amiga, so another one placing it in the summer of 91. The review for DOS came a couple months earlier in June. Death Knights is the sixth game utilizing SSI's best-selling and award-winning Gold Box game system for the AD&D role-playing game. After several years out on the market, the game system seems a little tattered and less impressive than when it first appeared. The 8-bit, 4-color EGA graphics, for example, are far from state-of-the-art, but many of the excellent features stand out in contrast to more graphically impressive games like Eye of the Beholder, which was released shortly before Death Knights. For the first time in the series, a character created in the previous game and used in this one gets to keep magic items and equipment that they obtained in that game. And Death Knights has auto mapping and auto combat. Death Knights definitely does not have auto mapping. There is also a rich plot with numerous mini quests, well worked out methods of communication and exploration over a wide area of the game map, and wilderness travel. Do not let the polish and splash of Eye of the Beholder take away your lust for Death Knights. This is the same game engine that you have come to love through battle after battle. Yes, the old warhorse has seen better days, but this warhorse is not ready for pasture. He goes on to claim the game is linear and that it's based off the second edition D&D rules, when females and non-humans can only have a maximum strength of 18(50). That's the first edition. If you liked any of the previous Gold Box games from Pool of Radiance through Buck Rogers, and you were not spoiled by Eye of the Beholder's dazzling beauty, you will enjoy Death Knights of Krynn. That review written by L.C. Giovetti, and while he's no Shea Adams in terms of his knowledge, he did enjoy the game. Now, far be it from me to defend the DOS EGA graphics. They are not 8-bit with 4 colors. They can certainly seem like 8-bit at times, but they are 16 colors with a subjectively terrible color palette. In terms of the Amiga port, it ranges from nearly identical to the DOS version through slightly better, all the way to eye-wide-openly better. Of course, the music and sound effects are never the highlight you come to a Gold Box game for, but they are objectively best on the Amiga. As are the graphics, with the Amiga adding beautiful skin tones opposed to the DOS Snow White or Blood Red. What a beautiful map compared to DOS, as well as those gradients I talked about earlier. All of these Gold Box games on the Amiga, they are the VGA games well before the actual VGA games. It was me specifically playing the DOS versions in the late 90s which made me go, something is wrong here, and then I sought out emulation, because the Amiga just does it better. Not always mind-bogglingly better, although that's true sometimes, but it consistently adds polish. Feeling as if I didn't get enough into the magic system in my video review for Champions of Krynn, I'd like to correct that now. Since the creation of the world, 3 moons have governed the powers of magic in Krynn. As the moons wax and wane, so do the powers of magic aligned to them. Each moon has a different cycle and affects a different group of mages. Mages of the white robes gain their power from Solinari, the white moon. Mages of the red robes are governed by Lunitari, the red moon. The evil mages of the black robes are empowered by the dark moon, Nutari. The current position of the moon is displayed at the top of your computer screen, and their effects are as follows. Say you were a 10th level mage. With a new moon, you would be operating as a 9th level. With a waning moon, you would be where you should be. With a waxing moon, you have 1 additional spell, and with a full moon, you would be operating as an 11th level mage with 2 additional spells and an additional saving throw. The magic of Krynn operates in spheres, with the different schools of mages only able to manipulate certain ones. Spells castable by one order may not necessarily be cast by another. You're going to want red and white robe mages, because only red can cast Haste, Dimension Door, Fire Touch, and only white will give you Minor Globe of Invulnerability, Cloud Kill, Hold Monster, and the most powerful spell in the entire game, Delayed Blast Fireball. And my feelings on the magic system haven't really changed. It's interesting because it's different, but I could take it or leave it. I think I would have preferred the Dragonlance line to have different spells rather than limiting who can cast what was already available in the Forgotten Realms. In terms of those spells, you mostly stick to your old favorites like Fireball or Lightning Bolt, but I did find a few new ones that I enjoyed. Dimension Door allows the mage to teleport himself to another point on the battlefield within his line of sight. So this in particular is good with the multi-class character. So if a fighter is also a mage, he can use Dimension Door to more strategically position himself. Fire Touch creates a blazing aura around the recipient. This aura adds 2 to 12 points of extra fire damage to all the recipient's attacks. Extraordinarily useful spell, especially against the dreaded skeletal warriors who are completely immune to magical attacks and heavily resistant to physical ones. Globe of Invulnerability protects against 1st to 4th level spells, so somebody can cast a fireball at you and you'll receive no damage. There's some good ones in there, there's some you'll probably never use, but within the combat system, it's just wonderful. I can't speak more highly of this game's strategic combat. Dragon Magazine, September 1991. Reviewing the DOS release, although the screenshots are actually the Amiga version, receiving 5 out of 5 stars. When we received Death Knights of Krynn, we were more than a little concerned. After all, we had just reviewed SSI's Eye of Beholder with its advanced user interface and rules based on the AD&D 2nd edition game. How could we possibly return to the older user system? We did so quite easily, in fact. It was wonderful to return to the lands of the Dragonlance saga. Death Knights of Krynn is a great deal of fun and packed with excitement. We definitely recommend Death Knights of Krynn to fantasy role-playing gamers. We can't wait for the next volume. And they're the ones who actually care about what this audience will like. And of course, they were also owned by TSR, but it doesn't do them any good to lie and piss off a bunch of nerds, does it? The people writing their reviews, they love games. As we meet Sir Durfee, who's one of the best NPCs you'll come across in any of these Gold Box games, we'll shift to the journal entries. I have been a knight since early in life. I have fought in the numerous battles against evil's forces. One by one, each of my friends have died in battle or ambush, with Martani's forces crushed. I came here to visit with my lost comrades, alas. Even in the heart of Salamia's greatest fortress, I am besieged by evil. If I can't find peace, then I shall take the battle to them. Quickly now, for my friends' crypts are being desecrated. Onward into the eternal war. What's so great about Durfee is that he can be with you for half the game, injecting dialogue. Death Knights is actually a regression from Curse of the Azure Bonds and Champions of Krynn in terms of your party being involved with the story. At the beginning of the game, Amiga Bill was asked if you'd like to help with the healing. I get stared at a couple times, happens in real life too, and later on there's going to be a message for Esper Dreams, but primarily we are just getting talked at, not talked to, and for me it's better role-playing for us to be involved. Durfee being in our party, fighting alongside us, and we control him, by the way, which is wonderful. This helps alleviate what could have been a real downer in terms of your party's involvement. Here's an ad for the game, along with a couple sales charts that I found. The Gold Box games, always big sellers. Here it is at the end of March 1991, when it had first come out for DOS and the Commodore 64, the third best-selling game. And here at the end of August, after it had been released for the Amiga. Number 8 this month, number 4 last month. Computer Gaming World, July 1991. I had to get to her eventually. Let's see what Scorpia has to say. Death Knights of Krynn is the follow-up, naturally enough. The Champions of Krynn is pretty much standard Gold Box fare, with the emphasis mostly being on fighting your way through the game. The plot is essentially, get Fuzel the Evil Wizard, and there's the obligatory final encounter with Fuzel at the end. In this case, Fuzel happens to be Lord Soth, a man, with definite necrophiliac tendencies. Soth just loves undead, practically undead anything. There's nothing that he digs more than animating some hapless corpse and sending out to wreak grave consequences on the world. If you're bringing your characters over from Champions, remember that the good stuff, such as the Dragonlance, Gauntlets of Ogre Power, Belt of Giant Strength, Mace of Disruption, etc., won't come with them. However, don't despair. As you progress in Death Knights, all these goodies will turn up again, and this time, you won't have to give them back at the end. You proud of that one, Scorpia? The celebrations are rudely interrupted by the appearance of Sir Carl riding a Death Dragon. This causes a bit of consternation to all, as Sir Carl died valiantly in Champions. Rather puts a damper on all the fun, seeing a former comrade as a quickened corpse working for the other side. What you hate, Scorpia, always brings me the biggest smile in loving. In general, there's a humdrum feel to the game. We've been this way before, and play tends to have mechanical quality. There are no puzzles to speak of, little scope for true role-playing, and even the side quests begin to look depressingly similar after a while. Something is certainly needed to freshen up the AD&D series, which, like most entertainment product lines which depend on sequels, has fallen into a predictable rut. Death Knights isn't a bad game. It's merely so much like all the others that anyone who has played them could almost play this one in his or her sleep. God forbid a role-playing game doesn't have that many puzzles. Stick to adventures, Scorpio. Now, it's not a bad game, but let's not mention a single thing about it that I like. I love the glossing over of your returning party members. Remember that you don't get any of the good stuff, she says. Let's rephrase it more accurately for Scorpia. Remember that you don't get to start the game as a god. Perhaps you should have hung on to that +3 sword or that +2 mace. None of the good stuff, huh? It's interesting the way she starts that paragraph. Here's an alternate perspective. For the first time ever in a gold box game, and an extreme rarity in others, most of your character's weapons transfer forward to this game. Now recall her final thoughts that it's not a bad game, but it's interesting how she frames weapons transferring forward for the first time as a negative instead of a positive. And likewise with Sir Carl, a former comrade, as a quickened corpse working for the other side, putting a damper on all the fun. This is the most well-connected sequel of any of the gold box line, and Sir Carl is essential to that. It's not just find Mr. Foozle. There are 3 main villains in this game, all of whom appear throughout its entirety from beginning until the end. Sir Carl, the Dread Wolf, and Lord Soth. They're really right up there with Terran Thraxis as some of the most memorable villains in this entire franchise. How about we go through some of the more interesting journal entries? I heard voices coming from above, from the surface. Names were mentioned: Lord Soth, Sir Carl, Sebas Asmore. There was talk of a Dragonlance and something called the erotic omniscience. Conquest. That was the topic. World conquest. All turns black as you plummet into dark catacombs. You grope in the darkness, tearing through walls with gossamer spiderwebs until you see speckled light and head forward. It is a candle held by a long-faced man. There's a string around his wrist, but it has been cut. As you draw near, a door shuts and the candle is blown out. This happens again. On the third try, the candle flickers but stays lit. You step past a red door into a small bare room. The long-faced man transforms into a young Islamic knight who hands you an ornate key, the color of blood, for every key a prisoner, he warns. Then you awake. The graveyard is silent except for whispers, wind. All seems in order. You find Sir Carl's grave heaped in flowers and marked by the gleaming marble obelisk that Maya had prepared. Yet something is amiss. The obelisk leans slightly. As you put out a hand to correct it, it suddenly topples. Crash! Full on the grave it falls, breaking through sod and casket to reveal black tunnels that reek of putrefaction and disease. Those villainous brutes, they ransacked my study and took what military texts they could find. The art of murder and mayhem, advanced taunts and tortures, 101 intimidation techniques, they took them all. They just laughed and beat me senseless with a book titled Brain Traumas and the Severely Pummeled. Of course, some of the journal entries are false and are there to keep you from reading ahead. This one you can actually get if you're really bad. Fairies cluster around you, hundreds of their tiny hands holding you in place. You are too treacherous to go free, and are too dangerous to remain in our wood. You will therefore become a part of our wood. Roots sprout from your feet, embedding you deeply in the earth. Leaves sprout from your hair and fingertips. The fairies exclaim with pleasure and perch on your branches. Don't mess with the fairies. As you leave Cerberus, a blond man approaches from the woods. He's wearing a strange blue uniform, completely unfamiliar to you. The weapon on his belt is equally mysterious. I just wanted to congratulate you on your rescue of Cerberus, he says. It always pays to remember that people are more important than orders. He waves goodbye and vanishes back into the woods. That one is not found in the game, but I believe it's a reference to Buck Rogers. As for the general quality of the journal entries, I believe Death Knights is the weakest to this point, possibly the weakest in the entire series. In particular, the introduction, which is less than half a page, reiterating the first game. There is no lore setting up this one. The entries themselves average 1 to 2 paragraphs. It's not that you won't enjoy what's there, it's just obvious they spent less time writing them. I believe Secret of the Silver Blades, along with Death Knights of Krynn, were the ones which were worked on the least by TSR and the most by SSI. And this would explain why there's less journal entries, less portrait animations, less widescreen pics which denote special events in the story. Yet still, I love this game. Of the 4 I have reviewed so far, Pool of Radiance is my favorite, Death Knights is number 2. On a point-by-point basis, this game fixed every complaint I had about Champions. That one was too linear, this one is non-linear. There wasn't much variety in the enemies, way too many Draconians. There's a variety here, not that many Draconians. Champions felt too easy on its default difficulty of Veteran. I increased the difficulty to Adept here, but even at a lower difficulty, this game is much harder, and I like that. I can go on. There's no menu-based towns in this game. Love that. I thought there was a missed opportunity with Sir Carl's death in that Maya was standing right there, yet he never addresses her. You know, that love story was a major plot point for that game, but Death Knights is going to correct it very shortly. Video games and computer entertainment, September 1991. Now, this one is framed as covering all platforms, but the version they played, I believe, is the Amiga version. This return to the world of Krynn is especially welcome to gamers already familiar with the realm, either through the Dragonlance series of books, or the earlier AD&D release of Champions of Krynn. Another quest in the land is all the more enjoyable since characters from the original title can be ported into the new adventure completely intact, with all their magic weapons, armor, and goodies. Read that one, Scorpio. Like prior Gold Box releases, there are many other quests to solve along the way, and they may be tackled in a non-linear order. Combine these quests form a solid adventure that completely incorporates the second edition advanced rules of the original game. Oh, I had such high hopes for you. So let's make it clear again that this game follows the first edition rules primarily. There really is nothing new to Death Knights of Krynn, aside from an update to an already engrossing storyline. SSI might feel this line has evolved to its natural endpoint, but gamers frequently eschew pure sequels with nothing new to offer. It would be a shame if role-players passed this one by for that reason. Death Knights of Krynn uses a good system and tells an exciting story. Ed, Dill, or Dealey. And an overall score of 8 out of 10 was given. What makes me say this was the Amiga version that was covered are the screenshots, which are the Amiga, but it wasn't SSI that sent them. Look at the names. Lisette, Monel, Sister of Mercy, Pal O' Mine. That's his genuine nerd party. So does this count as petting the dog in Death Knights of Krynn? Goodbye, scary doggy. You were a worthy foe. This game does the villains so well. There are 3 of them whom receive an equal amount of weight. And besides appearing throughout the story, you face them multiple times in combat. Excepting one, Sir Carl, whom we have that connection with from the first game. We don't take care of him. Maya does. And this is an emotional moment if you've been through these games. What was Scorpia saying about the big, powerful Fuzel, which culminates in a Fuzel fight? This is a way to degrade games with villains, which is most RPGs, by the way. If you don't like that, why are you reviewing these games? An obelisk stands here, inscribed. For Maya and Sir Carl Gerson, the war is over. They have found the peace that was denied them for so long. Yeah, these are just Fuzel fights, and there's no redeeming value in having Sir Carl return. That's why you could hear me go aw in the background when I read it. Per usual, I would like to discuss the hand mapping of these games, which I view as essential, especially to the people who have never done it before. But even for me, I continue to do it because it's a pivotal aspect to the game's overall pacing. These games are designed thinking that's what you'll be doing. You're going to experience these things in a whole new, wonderful way if you just avoid the clue books and resist the online maps or your gold box companions. To Britain, Amiga Action, October 1991. It gets to a certain point with some games where you start to run out of different things to say, but SSI have not rested on their laurels, and each game in the series has been slightly improved, so that nowadays they are virtually faultless. Death Knights of Krynn is yet another superb role-playing game from SSI. As per usual, the graphics and sound are probably the best ever experienced in this type of RPG. I really wouldn't go that far. Overall score of 86%. See you Amiga also in October. Death Knights is a massive game with a series of enjoyable and deep quests. In all, a game for wise and cunning AD&D fanatics. Fiona kidding. Graphics 80%, sound 75%, less stability 91%, playability 92%, overall 88%. Let's get into some memories. This is the first one, the first gold box game that I put any time into. Back when the Amiga was the main computer in the basement, I can remember fumbling around Gargath Outpost. Later on, when it was moved to my room, this was the first RPG that I spent serious time with. Getting level drained in Dulcimer, exploring the Bazaar in Kalaman. These are memories which will stick with me forever. And I'm impressed at how far I had gotten. I put check marks next to all the journal entries I had discovered, and I made it all the way to Durfee back then. I had this clear image of trying to get into that tower for the longest time, but it's one of the few areas which are closed off to you until you do a certain thing. Now, if it was a linear game, you'd get stuck, and that would be the end of your experience, but I could go off and explore some more, and eventually I got in there. I had figured that was the end area, but no, I probably still had another 50% left to go. So while Pool of Radiance was the first one I remember watching my dad play, and Champions of Krynn was the first one I ended up beating later on, Death Knights was the first one I put serious time into. The Australian Commodore and Amiga Review, August 1991. Keep your Amiga 100% Amiga with genuine Amiga add-ons from Commodore. After 3 years of building out advanced Dungeons & Dragons computer role-playing games, you would think SSI would be innovative and try something completely different, wouldn't you? Expel that breath of hope and inhale a deep lungful of the truth. Death Knights of Krynn is the usual AD&D stuff we've come to expect from SSI. But if you can't get enough of the damned repetitive things like myself, read on. What an absolute horrific way to start a review of a game you apparently enjoy, although you spend most of the review complaining about it. If you like combat-oriented adventures, if you just like AD&D, Dragonlance, or are simply new to the scene, try this game out by all means. I did, and I love it. Mind-bogglingly curious way to discuss a game that you love, but an overall score was given of 88%. Amiga Power, November 1991. Published by US Gold over in Europe. Hell's bells. Where's Mark when you need him? A freak shift in the Earth's magnetic field caused this game to be accidentally given to me for review. The world's all-time least knowledgeable Dungeons & Dragons expert. I don't think it's as uncommon as you think it is for magazines to hand out the reviews for these games over to novices. And in my experience, Amiga Power has a particular knack for that. You name the genre or game. There's a serious point in here. It doesn't seem to have occurred to SSI that someone might buy this game without any prior knowledge of the series, and there isn't much here to help them work out what on earth's supposed to be going on. What I wasn't expecting to discover in the end was a game remarkably similar in concept to a geriatric 8-bit classic by the name of Chaos. I think he means Lords of Chaos, and my reaction to that is, aww, because that's the only other RPG you've ever played. The release of Eye of the Beholder makes it redundant in every meaningful way, but that won't put off diehard fans, and neither could anything else, I might say. Stuart Campbell, unnecessary, fiddly control, and a surprisingly simplistic game, makes for a very average AD&D release. There isn't much here for the non-converted 60%. Exactly what I've come to expect from Amiga Power. I love his gaslighting of AD&D fans. Instead of accepting his ignorance of the genre and just saying that it's something I can't understand, he tries to speak for me, saying it wouldn't even be a 90% game to AD&D fans, and that Eye of the Beholder makes it redundant in every meaningful way. Ah, yes, a game with practically no story and real-time, non-tactical combat makes this game redundant in every meaningful way. But he's also gaslighting those who don't know about these games by preemptively dismissing every complaint one might have about his review. You, the novice, should dismiss everything they say because they will dismiss everything I say. And the fact that they actually know what they're talking about means nothing. Perhaps I might be capable of speaking for the non-converted, considering I was 10 years old when I got through half of this game, the first gold box game I ever played, and I loved it. He hides his lack of knowledge with knowledge, dismissing this game because it's like Lords of Chaos. That's the only RPG he's ever played. Dismissing this game because Eye of the Beholder makes it redundant. He's never played Eye of the Beholder. There's nothing like a little bit of knowledge to do a whole lot of damage. I really think that the genesis for a lot of people's indifference to these games stems from the graphics, and the original engine was built for the Commodore 64. So here I am for the first time showing you the Commodore 64 version of a gold box game. Why is 2/3 of the screen dedicated to showing people's names instead of the view? It's because it was built for the 64. And while the 16-bit versions, especially on the Amiga, upgrade the graphics, you're still limited by the original engine. People on DOS expected more. People on the Amiga expected more, even though each version bettered the last. A good game is a good game, and these were magnificent games for the Commodore 64. And as far as I'm concerned, it's damn good here on the Amiga. So final thoughts. The reviews from back in the day, per usual with the Gold Box games, were all over the place. Some thought it was yet another masterpiece. Some thought it straddled the line of mediocrity. Some thought it was yet more crap. It's of genre, and not everyone is going to be attracted to certain types of games, but I feel this is a legendary series, and Death Knights of Krynn is yet another great game in that series. It's the best since Pool of Radiance for me. It's the best sequel in terms of connection with the game that came before it. Graphically, they deserve more credit. On an artistic level, look at Guitaria. Here on the Amiga, these games are beautiful. And it rolled back some things like animations and journal entries, so it's not perfect. Of course, the economy sucks, as always, but it's still a great story with some wonderful characters you meet along your journey. There's interesting side quests, and the combat, as always, is first rate. Perhaps I am speaking to the converted, but you know what? There's a lot of converted. Special thanks to my party members who had no say in the matter, but I enjoyed their company. Hope you'll check out my written review at shot97retro.blogspot.com. If you enjoyed this review, I've already covered Champions of Krynn, Pool of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds, and Eye of the Beholder. I will see you all when I feel like it. Goodbye.